Around out there. Yeah. You
I
okay?
could see what I was doing.
Oh, no.
Just like you said, it's dark in here. That's all. He knew she was allergic, but she's. So she goes.
Oh, delayed.
Yeah.
Yes. We should get them in touch, especially
Oh.
did you fire yourself?
I'm so, that's new.
What did you? Okay, welcome everybody. This is Monday, October 13th, 2025. This is the Steamboat Springs Historic Preservation Commission. It's 5:01 and we're gonna start with roll call. Julie, you want to start?
Sure. Julie Alcama, Commissioner.
Molly Rusher, Commissioner.
Katie Adams, Commissioner.
Mary Ann Capra, Commissioner.
Sally Kavanaugh, Commissioner. Caitlin Bearby Smith, staff.
Great. Thanks. Welcome, everybody. We will take public comment for anything not on tonight's agenda. So anything not up for public hearing, come to the podium or raise your hand on Zoom. Cool. Seeing none, we'll move to our first public hearing item for recommendation. This is the review of the Historic Preservation Plan and updated historic design guidelines. Caitlin, will you introduce this for us?
Yes, I will. I'm also waiting to be let into the meeting so I can share my screen for the presentation. We also have consultants Mariah Justice and John Southard on the Zoom link. They'll be joining today. So thank you all very much for taking the time to read the pretty extensive packet. As you know, we've been working on this project, I think, since I was hired about 3 years ago when we started writing that grant application. Prior to myself being hired, I know you all worked with Erica pretty extensively on doing some updates to the existing design guidelines. So in short, this is our first inaugural historic preservation plan and an update to our existing historic design guidelines that were originally crafted in 2001. And before I go on too much, I'm going to try to get into the Zoom meeting here. I'm going to go ask. No, it just says waiting to be let in. Rather than me just talking, you might as well have pretty visuals to look at.
I know, thanks. I don't see Maria or John either.
Yeah. Oh my God. All right, 1 minute here. Mariah, if you're online, do you want to share your screen and share the PowerPoint while I'm trying to Zoom? I apologize. All right, we're going to take a quick tech break here while we all join the meeting. Yeah, do you want to jump down to that?
Do you think that's how much we need?
Yeah, I want to make sure that I sent the right link to the consultants.
Okay. While we wait for our tech to get going, we're going to move down to the public hearing meeting minutes for August 11th, 2025. Does anyone have any edits or additions or changes to the August 11th minutes?
No.
Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve August 11th.
I make a motion to approve the August 11th meeting minutes.
Thank you. A second?
I'll second.
Thanks. August 11th meeting minutes for the public hearing are approved. How are you doing, Caitlin?
I'm doing good. I am almost there. All righty. So just a quick overview of the agenda, and then I will go on and introduce Mariah and John for the record. So I'm going to speak towards the project background and overview, planning process, and public engagement as a whole, as those related to both the historic preservation plan and the update to the design guidelines. And then I've broken just this quick presentation up by document type. So we'll start with the preservation plan. We'll go over just the background, the use of it, so who and how it's used, objectives, trends, constraints, opportunities, goals, recommendations, strategies, and then implementation. And then for the historic design guidelines, it's a bit shorter of a summary just because they were existing guidelines. So we're really going to focus on, again, document overview, use, who uses it, how do you use it, and then just a really brief summary of those updates, and then a summary of the additions. We have Mariah Justice and John Southard, both online. They are with Logan Simpson, and they have been instrumental in crafting and creating this plan. You all worked with them pretty extensively during the engagement strategy and did quite a few trainings, and so we're really grateful for their assistance and guidance on these final documents and also working with stakeholders throughout this process. So just a quick background, this project was funded in part by History Colorado State Historical Fund. We applied for a grant in April 2023. It was awarded in July of 2023. We led a competitive request for proposal process to select the most appropriate and qualified consultants. We selected a different consultant firm initially, which slowed the project down a bit. And then ended up going with Logan Simpson to do the work. So we began working with Logan Simpson in December 2024, January 2025. So it was a much shorter planning process and document creation process than we had initially expected. So it was just under a year. So this is just a snapshot of the public engagement. When we were approaching development of the preservation plan, when you're doing any sort of planning process, you want to engage with the public, right? Because they're actually the ones providing input on what should go in those guiding, current, midterm, and long-range planning documents. However, with this position being relatively new, with the city working with a consultant from 2016, we realized that we needed to first double tap on where our community was in terms of education around historic preservation, and then also take a deeper dive into what the role of our partners and stakeholders were in kind of sharing that weight with us. So we did a lot of education and engagement prior to the public process that we did for this plan through the engagement strategy. Specific to this plan, we did lead quite a few direct stakeholder meetings. They also attended some of our historic preservation roundtable meetings, and we did have 2 public open houses. So this is just an overview of the document. We start out with community values. We provide the legal framework for historic preservation from both the federal, state, and local level, an overview of our requirements as a certified local government. We document the existing program elements, provide an inventory of the places that are on our historic register. It was required of us to complete a historic context, so that's the historical write-up and background information of Steamboat Springs. We have many historic contexts throughout Routt County and Steamboat. However, the Routt County contexts are really broad, so not just within city limits and the development of our city and municipality. They pertain to the development of the county as a whole. And then also we have an agricultural context. And then we do have historic context specific to the development of commercial Old Town and residential Old Town. But we know Steamboat is much bigger than Old Town. Trends that are supported by specific constraints and opportunities, as well as goals, recommendations, and actionable strategies. There's also an implementation matrix that provides us the opportunity to actually build each of the strategies into our work plan. Not just my work plan, HPC's work plan as well. I think one of the most important developments or outcomes of the community engagement from the public open houses and with stakeholders was the identification of shared values. And so we have kind of two buckets of values: historic preservation specific values, and then values that might relate to other community issues or community initiatives. So some of those are sustainability, boosting tourism, promoting distinction, whereas historic preservation specific values are maintaining our unique character and preserving architecture. This is just a quick snapshot of, I guess you could say, the themes within the historic context that were developed. A lot of the feedback we received from stakeholders was that the historic context was too long and the information on the Indigenous Ute was too long. And I think we've addressed that well with the stakeholders and helping everyone who has a seat at the table understand that that is a requirement of the grantor. So the context did stay as is. We provided something that our stakeholders really were looking towards, was to have the document be outlined more similarly to the 2019 downtown plan. And one thing we took from that plan when we were on kind of version 2 was setting out an example of how the goals, recommendations, and then actionable strategies interact with one another. So we think that really helped kind of the understanding up front. The plan objectives, which also came from community engagement, were to define historic character, facilitate the creation of community-defined preservation goals, co-create and redefine a historic preservation program, examine and explore additional and alternative tools to manage historic properties, provide short, mid, and long-term outreach policy and process recommendations, and then to celebrate the historic resources of Steamboat Springs in new ways. And I'm going to have Mariah jump in here if she's on and just kind of quickly highlight the top trends that came out of the analysis of our program and historic preservation in Steamboat.
Sure. Thank you, Caitlin. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. We came away with 4 trends. After our first round of some pretty robust public engagement, 4 main things that we noticed were impacting the historic preservation program in Steamboat Springs. Trend number 1 is a regular loss of eligible resources. So lacking the mandatory, it's a mandatory review process, but not a mandatory enforcement process for eligible properties. We noticed that historic properties were being recognized, but the recommendations of the HPC and the city regarding any alterations to these properties is voluntary. And so we noticed that this was significantly contributing to the loss of historic fabric in Steamboat Springs. So often when the lot is worth more than the improvement upon it, we're finding that eligible resources aren't being used or reused and just being demolished instead. And so we found this was a huge opportunity to examine what currently defines an eligible resource. How can we maybe reassess that definition or reassess the current demolition processes and expand some current incentives to encourage property owners to either retain the eligible resource, alter it, or reuse it in some fashion. Our second trend that we noticed is that there was a significant amount of incompatible alterations and additions. So this kind of builds on that regular loss of eligible resources. So while compliance with HPC and staff guidance is voluntary, a lot of incompatible additions and alterations were undertaken to eligible resources. And so over time, it's kind of like that death by 1,000 cuts theory. A lot of the historic character of these places has been altered. And so with that, it's kind of a lack of a cohesive identity or like a cohesive aesthetic in the community. We noticed a few constraints that contribute to this. So as Caitlin mentioned earlier, we know that Steamboat is more than just Old Town. And so a lot of a steamboat other than Old Town hasn't really been documented. And there isn't current historic resource survey data to build off of. So that presents an opportunity to kind of acquire information to better manage the alterations and additions that are happening to these resources. And then two other major constraints is a perceived inconsistent application of the local historic preservation design guidelines. So that was another part of this project. We want to kind of refine that guidance, make sure it can be consistently applied and defensively, and serve as a basis for your defensible decisions. And lastly, there's a big need for design professionals that provide preservation-friendly designs or options to their clients. So this presented us with an opportunity to kind of explore incentivizing thoughtful design and encouraging education of design professionals. Trend 3 is our changing construction and housing market. Ever since 2020, the housing and construction market has just gone off the charts, and it inspired a ton of accelerated change in Steamboat Springs, particularly with, as I mentioned before, with the value of the lot and the improvement upon it. And we're noticing that a lot of tools that are in place currently for the historic preservation program aren't enough to address these changes. So we wanted to look at the constraint of the current, what's in the current community development code, what definitions are lacking, what processes aren't working, what timelines may not be working. Are policies for historic preservation aligned with current other building and zoning policies? So we wanted to examine this opportunity to provide some code amendments and propose some code amendments that may help to refine these and get the processes to align a little bit better, and so that the preservation program can be a little bit more effective. We noticed that current incentives aren't enough to, Caitlin, if you could go back for me, please.
Sorry.
That's okay. We noticed that current incentives aren't effective in supporting the designation of eligible resources as historic resources. So we want to look at how we can increase those listings and increase a more consistent and cohesive identity for Steamboat Springs. And as I mentioned before, it's just a fast changing housing and construction market. So how can we leverage HP as a tool that we can use to address these changes in the built environment and help it be more aligned with other city goals like economic development and sustainability and affordable housing. And our last trend is a declining sense of place. Throughout all of our public engagement, one of the overarching terms that we heard used was identity and preservation ethic. And so we noticed that a lot of Steamboat Springs residents had a pretty cohesive identity, and they had this desire to protect the natural environment that was fairly consistent across the board. But we noticed that that kind of preservation ethic was lacking when applied to the built environment. And we noticed this is due to a few factors, with just the changing market, and then kind of education engagement and outreach for historic preservation was kind of behind the curve a little bit. And then those other factors, those other constraints like lack of clarity in the development code, perceived inconsistent application of guidelines, it kind of creates this murky sense of what is historic preservation and how does it serve our community. So we found that there was a lot of opportunity to provide proactive education engagement and outreach to engage the community at the forefront, and help them to understand why these places are important to them, not just important to look at, but important places to experience. And then we found a lot of opportunity to kind of elevate Steamboat Springs and its residents and its visitors as stewards of the community, not so much just people who are in the community, but people who have a sense of responsibility for it, much like they do for the natural environment. And then also there's other opportunities to explore provisions around protection of archaeological resources and resources that may not be as evident, but are incredibly important to the community.
So 5 goals were developed. Under each of the 5 goals, there are recommendations, between 2 to 3 recommendations, and then there are specific strategies. So as we walk through these goals, I'm not going to call out every single recommendation and strategy on the page, but I do want to highlight each one of the 5 goals. And then, if your eyes go towards anything on the screen or something comes up, feel free to ask when you're in discussion. So goal 1 is to amplify the historic character of Steamboat Springs through the identification and protection of significant historic and cultural resources. And so this really focuses on the what, right? The physical, what do we have and how do we view that as important? So establishing a system of survey and resurvey, creating additional historic context specific to undersurveyed areas, and also to help document all cultures within Steamboat, and then update and revise the Steamboat Springs Historic Preservation Design Guidelines. So hopefully by November, we can cross that off the list. We also, one of the recommendations from, or some of the feedback we received from our stakeholders, Historic Routt County, was to include an impact versus effort scale. So to help identify, is this low effort, high impact, high effort, high impact, low effort, low impact, high effort, low impact. So that really helps us when we're work planning and also deciding timelines and funding for some of these items. Goal 2 is to prioritize continued use of eligible resources and support their listing as historic resources and historic landmarks on our local register. While this seems really simple, initially we kind of had it drafted as increase the list, increase the amount of listings we have. But what we kept coming back to is that we first need to find a way to support the owners of eligible resources so they want to make compatible changes to their property, whether that's through different incentives or working with them in other areas of our CDC. Because the whole understanding is if they kind of realize that historic preservation doesn't just capture their property in time, they might be more amped to want to list their property on our local register. So promoting continued use, and then increasing listings. Goal 3 is to leverage historic preservation as an effective tool to address city housing, sustainability, and economic development policies and initiatives. So to create incentives and dedicated funding sources, I will expand on this one a little bit. As we were going through the first draft, both with HPC, your feedback, and then also Historic Route County's feedback, it became really clear that financial incentives are not necessarily the way to go. The cost of land and our community's availability to purchase into expensive land oftentimes overrides the financial benefit of the incentives that we have. And so some of the specific strategies that we have for expanding our incentives are not necessarily financial incentives. Exploring the implementation of neighborhood conservation overlay districts. That is likely quite a few years down the road, but we didn't want to take that off of the table. That was an original policy recommendation in the 2004 area community plan under historic preservation. We also currently have a transfer of development rights program as an incentive that we have not necessarily tapped into. So we also wanted to retain that. Promote existing incentives. We don't want to remove any of those, just add to them. Goal 4, amend the community development code to provide effective tools and processes that enhance the historic preservation program while protecting private property rights and ensuring transparency. The recommendation here is to revise certain sections of the community development code to implement better policies and processes, and then also to integrate historic preservation throughout the community development code. So I will touch on a few of these. We're looking at amending review timelines for selective historic projects, particularly as they come in through development plans and then also adjustments for residential structures, or when we are moving and relocating a structure. We know those timelines are really short. And so we're not really giving historic preservation all that we can if we're putting it into a very short timeline. Amending the process for designating historic districts. So that would look at doing a majority percentage or capping it at a number. Currently, we require 100% of owners to have a local historic district. So we think that that's some pretty easy, low-hanging fruit to hopefully create our first and many more local historic districts. Amending the demolition process, specific to looking at increasing the stay of demolition from 30 days to 90 days. That is a specific question we asked in the last community engagement survey, and it was received favorably. Looking at implementing by right allowances. Also highlighting integrity as a criteria for evaluating eligibility. We currently do not call that out in our code. And we know that we shouldn't necessarily always be evaluating historical, architectural, or geographic importance based on condition, but also integrity as a whole. Goal 5, fostering a community-wide sense of stewardship through prioritizing public involvement in preservation activities and weaving historic preservation into community and partner-led events. This really, we formulated 2 recommendations, and one is basically to implement the education, engagement, and outreach strategy, and then the second is focused on pursuing a meaningful government-to-government relationship with tribal and descendant communities. In the implementation section of the plan, so that's pretty much the last section where there's the long chart, we did provide an overview of how to interpret the priority level, the effort and impact levels, and then we also provided acronyms for all of the corresponding planning documents across our city that mention historic preservation. And we noted which strategies support those existing policies, objectives, and goals. I'd like to provide some quick overview of the stakeholder feedback. Engagement with the public is not always a smooth process, but it is a meaningful process. And I think we've all learned a lot from working together over the last month and a half. When we sent the initial plan and guidelines out to our stakeholders, they definitely had a lot of changes and edits. For the plan particularly, they were most concerned about consistency across the document and kind of the lack of a sense of urgency that is needed in historic preservation and in our community right now to save important places. They identified kind of that overall concept of the rising cost of land doesn't equal that financial benefits are going to assist. Again, the historic context. The document should be more graphic and user-friendly for the layperson. And so this is where we did have a little back and forth and making sure that we truly understand who is the user of this document. The plan itself is really a guiding document for staff, for the Historic Preservation Commission to make decisions and to work plan off of, and then also for City Council to make decisions regarding policy and process and program changes. However, it is a public document and we want all users to be able to easily find the information that they may need. And so that was really helpful feedback. They also requested the moving of specific sections, longer sections to appendices. But we couldn't do that because the grantor wasn't supportive of that. So we did address, I hope almost all of that feedback. We improved the graphics and the layout. We also included an executive summary that's kind of a, if you were to print out pages, 1 through 9, it could be its own standalone document and you could just get a really short snapshot of what the historic preservation is, what it intends to do. So improve the graphics and layout. We did consolidate some information and apply their specific edits to content. And we added call-out boxes that really highlight some key takeaways and key concepts. We received additional feedback from the public and from staff. I will say our planning development review team had some really great feedback in terms of consolidating some of the trends and constraints and how to organize the goals and recommendations section. So we did apply that. I tried to summarize some of what you all sent me. So just know Julie and Sally and Katie. I don't think you guys had many edits on the plan, mostly on the guidelines, but they will get in there. We did receive a comment to remove a photo from a local architecture firm. And then, of course, HPC's pending edits. Mariah, if you are still there, would you like to go over the guidelines really quickly?
Sure, I would be happy to. So for our design guideline update, we've restructured the document to make it more concise and easier to use for residents and design professionals and the HPC. So the structure is what you see up on the screen in front of you. We added that FAQ section that we kind of fleshed out with our education engagement and outreach strategy. So we answered all of the who, what, when, where, why, and how questions at the front of the document with really concise language. We added flowcharts so that folks can understand the process, and if you have an eligible resource and you want to make a change, this is what you do. If you have a historic resource and you want to make a change, this is what you do. Kind of fleshed out the differing levels of compliance, what that means, how it impacts the property owner, and outline some current incentives that Steamboat currently offers for historic resources and historic landmarks. Then we kind of moved into our design guidance. So we opened with Secretary of Interior standards. And then we have our specific design guidelines where there are 11 different chapters pertaining to kind of overarching themes like doors, roofs, additions. So it'd be easier to find your way to what guidance you're looking for. And then we have a final chapter on architectural styles in Steamboat Springs, so that property owners can better identify what are the character defining features of my my property and what that means and why they're important. What did we update? So this is only a design guideline update. So we went through and updated the guidance because, as we know, preservation's all constantly evolving. It's always evolving. National Park Service is constantly updating their guidance as they see fit and to kind of stay on top of the preservation world. So we took that updated guidance from Park Service and applied it to these guidelines. Some of that guidance includes alternate material choices, guidance that speaks to differing materials for inclement weather or energy efficiency, such as roofing materials, things like solar panels. What do we do with our new sustainability features that we can apply to properties? Updated guidance on additions, secondary structures, things like enclosing porches. Guidance that is more amenable to replacement than repair. As materials are evolving, replacements can be suitable dependent upon your climate. So providing some more clarified guidance there, applying dormers to properties and replacing windows either for energy efficiency or and keeping consistent window configuration. So applying some clear guidance to those aspects.
And of course, preserving and restoring the historic window is always preferred, for the record.
Always preferred, but just want to make some guidance so that if you have to take your window out and replace it, providing some clear guidance on how and why to do that. Some additions that we added, there's a section on river rock application in Steamboat Springs and the materials chapter. Architectural styles and character defining features. So we expanded this section to include an updated discussion on newer, quote unquote, newer architectural styles that are found in Steamboat Springs. What are their character defining features? Why does that matter? We provided updated drawings to demonstrate appropriate and inappropriate treatments that provide residents, property owners, and design professionals with clearer ideas for what would be appropriate and what would be inappropriate. We provided a list of acronyms because HP can be confusing, and so we wanted to make it as easy to use as possible. And we added those flow charts and updated guidance at the beginning of the document.
We also, I would say, received more feedback, both from HPC and from our stakeholders on the guidelines than the historic preservation plan. And I'm sure our stakeholders sitting in the audience right now is looking at this 8 bullet point list and they're like, how did you summarize our feedback in 8 bullet points? But it's just a very brief overview. So numerous photos seem to be inaccurate and didn't represent kind of the best of the best or stellar examples of preserved important structures. And so that was, again, a little bit of a back and forth because these design guidelines are for all of Steamboat, right? They're not just for the Crawford houses within Steamboat. We want them to be applicable to a small mining cabin and a 1973 base of the mountain house or residence. A lot of the photo captions didn't accurately pertain to the photos. Overall, they did feel that the document was cumbersome and long and potentially wouldn't be accessible to residents or professionals. I think one of the terms used was like, well, if your, aging Aunt Anna is living next door, how is she going to use these? And she doesn't know where to start, right? She's not a design professional. She's not sitting on HPC. She's not planning staff. The architectural styles section, most people thought that those should follow the guidelines rather than being flip-flopped. They were initially in the beginning. As we said, preservation is always evolving, and we do use the term vinyl in the guidelines, both as an example of when it's inappropriate to use vinyl as a substitute material, but then also in the sense that at times that may be the only option for the homeowner, whether it's from a cost perspective or from a materials availability perspective. But remember, applying these design guidelines is really a conversation with preservation staff and with our HPC, and that's why we help evaluate what the current needs of the building owner, are at the time. No project is the same. And then there were a lot of suggested edits to the guidelines on yards, fences, specifically in regards to the setback of fences, and then also rooftop additions and the setback and placement in alignment with the surrounding roof and eaves. And there was also concern with the enclosing of porches. We did receive another list of edits from Historic Routt County today. Those were forwarded to you all as a rainbow item. And then they're also included in the packet for public record. I will be going through with consultants tomorrow and implementing all of the feedback and edits that you all submitted. So thank you for that. And if you have specific edits after this meeting, of course, feel free to send those in the morning or this evening. We'll get those in there. We will also work to make the revisions that we can that Historic Routt County sent today. There were some comments on photos. And then there was a comment regarding enclosure of porches. So again, that's kind of been one of the back and forth. You as a commission know, we have reviewed many porch enclosures and we've followed the Secretary of Interior standards and the preservation brief as it relates to porches in applying historic standards and guidelines. Historic preservation is also a preference, right? That's why there are standards and guidelines that are broad. So as of right now, I feel that the enclosure of porches will be left in there, but we will make a note in the guidelines that, of course, similar to windows, porches should not be enclosed. However, if you are enclosing a porch, here is how you do it.
Can I say something about that before we move on and I forget?
Yeah.
I might be confused about the conversation, but about porches, the community has been enclosing them for more than 50 years. Is there any points on that in the guidelines that speaks to an enclosure of a porch that is now historic?
Not currently,
Or
but
age?
not currently, but we could add something specific to porches. There was also, you'll see in the feedback that Historic Route County provided today, a question on making it clear that not all, I think it was in regards to additions, and possibly rear additions, possibly rooftop additions, but also making it clear that not all additions that have gained, not all additions that were constructed 50 years ago or more are necessarily compatible with the original historic structure. And so just because they're 50 years of age doesn't mean that they are contributing to that
Right.
historic resource. And in some cases should actually be removed.
Good.
Yeah.
Maybe the same with these enclosed porches.
Yeah, the same with this, and maybe also specifying removed and or redone.
Non-compatible.
Yeah,
Okay.
made compatible, we can say.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification. So again, we did not apply the enclosure of porches. I think that's a good comment, Katie. Alternate materials specific to vinyl. But I think we can make it more clear that that is the last option.
Sure.
And then again, we haven't actually integrated any of the feedback submitted by Historic Route County today, but we will do our best to do that tomorrow. And the document was completely restructured. So the architectural styles and drawings were moved below the guidance. We did remediate duplicate guidelines. The stakeholders were really great to help us identify areas. They were like, well, this kind of looks like it should be under guideline 2.3, or this kind of seems like it's saying the same thing. Why not combine them? So we were able to do that. And then we did make revisions to the process flow charts to make it clear that it's not just before you submit a building permit that you go to planning staff and start working with them. It is before you actually begin your design work that you go to planning staff and start working through the preservation process. Because remember, what we're trying to avoid is a complete set of drawings, 2 days before they apply for a building permit.
Right.
So. Next steps, staff and consultants will incorporate any of the feedback and edits requested by HPC prior to finalizing the documents for the city council packet. City council is does have the final decision-making capability, so they will be formally adopting both the historic preservation plan and the guidelines. After we make those edits and prepare them for city council, at the same time, I will send the final plan and guidelines off to the grantor for their review, so they have additional time rather than waiting until after the city council meeting. And then the item will be heard by city council for final adoption on Tuesday, October 21st. Questions?
So the documents that are in the packet, that is mostly up to date, and you're just going to adopt what HRC provided you today. So if there's still errors in what you have in the packet,
If there
know about them.
are errors, please send me the errors by tomorrow at noon.
Okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure we were still editing the same version of the document.
Yes. You guys have the most up-to-date version of the document.
Okay.
And so what you would be making a recommendation for would be the final versions as amended with any final corrections sent to staff by noon.
And so I saw in your bullets that comments were made that it's lengthy and hard. It's not super approachable.
Well, it's approachable now. We're on version 8.
Okay, so that
We're on
was
version
that's my
2.
question. This is the shrunk down version.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And, you know, in
It's a quick
doing,
reference guide. It's a plan.
No, it's not a quick reference guide.
I encourage you to remember page 5 in your little PDF viewer because that is the table of contents page. And then you can just click to which section you'd like to go to. And compared to some of the plans that served as inspiration for this plan and for the design guidelines, they're about half the length. So
A lot of work.
we could have doubled the size.
Anyone else? My questions you already covered, so I don't have too many. I was wondering what the planning staff, if they'd reviewed it and what some of their feedback might have been, but you covered that. And I was also curious about public feedback, so you covered that as well.
Yeah, and both Bob Keenan and Toby Stauffer were pretty instrumental in going through the recommendations and just with their overall feedback. I also did, at the 9th hour, I had Toby take a look at the section in the guidelines last week as they pertain to signs, just to
Mhm.
make sure that all of our language was consistent with our current sign code. So,
Yeah.
and she
Okay.
had some edits to that as well.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, they're the ones, you know, understanding and implementing as well as you. So it's important that they are familiar with this and they're familiar with these plans. So I was just curious how that went. It sounds like.
It went well. Yeah.
Did you want to say something? Okay. Yeah, I think that's it. I just want to like extend my thanks to you and the consultants at Logan Simpson. Both Mariah and John have really kind of dedicated themselves to this project and they've put a lot of time and thought into making it what it became and to make it more relatable and understandable and usable. So I appreciate the process that we've been through for our first time ever.
Thank you. I will say one other thing. So this plan should be guiding our program, right, for the next 5 to 10 years. And then we'll go back and look at our progress, look at what we've done, likely on like the 3-year mark, the 5-year mark, 7-year mark, 10-year mark. But it's a living document. Remember, if there's something that HPC feels really needs to be added to that plan, like that's up for discussion as the years go on and continue. Same with our design guidelines. We don't have to wait 25 years to update them next. If there is new guidance that comes out in a Park Service preservation brief, or any sort of change to the Secretary of Interior standards, we can apply that to the guidelines. We don't have to wait. This is just the true, you know, hopeful formal adoption of our very first ever preservation plan and a very thorough update to what was our outdated guidelines. So I just want to remind commissioners that they are living documents as time goes on and preservation
So
evolves.
to clarify then, if we did want to change down the road, does it go back to city council every time there's a change or once it's adopted, is it?
Yes, I believe it would go back to city council.
Okay.
However, it wouldn't be as extensive as a process, just
Yeah.
we're not drafting it for the first time. So that may be something as we're setting historic preservation commission goals for 2026, we might want to think about what our own kind of internal timeline might be, because we don't want to be going to city council every other month, you know, because we want to change a word in the document or such. But I think on an annual basis, it's good to take a look and see if we do want to provide any updates or major content changes, and then decide a time frame for that moving forward while we're goal setting, not tonight.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, speaking of, I think it would be a good idea since the years do go by quickly, in the section of the plan that lists the resources that are historically designated in Routt County and Steamboat Springs, we should probably put a qualifier in there that says, as of 2025, because that will become outdated, hopefully really quickly, because we just keep putting so many on. But it's good to have a central list but that's one thing that struck me that would really be outdated, and someone else mentioned as well.
That's a good idea, and just put a call out there that says for an updated list, go to the city's historic preservation
Yeah,
webpage.
yeah.
Thank you.
Any other final comments from commissioners about these two documents? Or questions? Okay, well, seeing none, then we'll open it up for public comment on the adoption of the historic preservation plan and updated historic guidelines. If you're here, come to the podium. If you're online, raise your little icon. Say your name and your address.
Good evening. My name is Kristen Rockford. I am here on behalf of Historic Routt County. I'm the executive director. My address is 430 Bluebell Court in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. On behalf of Historic Routt County, we'd like to share that we're very grateful that we had an opportunity to sit at the table and to provide feedback. And we're also very grateful that most of all that feedback was incorporated. And so we appreciate that as well. And I would also like to say that I appreciate all the hard work and HRC does too with Caitlin and the consultants. That was a ton of work for a brand new plan. And we're just very thrilled to know that there is going to be a plan in place. And we hope that the recommended action items that can be implemented immediately, that they are implemented as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tyler Gibbs, consultant to Historic Routt County. And I just want to reiterate the thanks to staff and to the consultants for a robust public process and engagement, particularly working with HRC through multiple iterations of comments. We really appreciate that very much. I think it was definitely constructive and a very productive process from our perspective. And we appreciate, you mentioned we sent a few more comments this morning, and sorry for, sending comments right up to the last minute. But again, and out of respect for the engagement that we have had, we wanted to make sure that we stayed engaged and responsive right up to the finish line. So again, we think it's been a good process. They're good documents, and we really look forward to them contributing to much greater awareness of the opportunities of preservation and a more positive working environment for preservation throughout the community with residents, the design and the construction community. So well done, and thanks again.
Mr. Gibbs, will you provide your address just for the
Oh, yeah.
minutes? Thank you.
2125 Trollhagen in Steamboat.
Thanks. I don't even know why we have to do it. I'll ask Rebecca. Okay, thank you. I don't see anyone else ready for public comment, so we'll close that section, which brings us to final comments, deliberation, and a motion. I believe we're making a motion to approve recommendation for approval for city council.
And I've put a sentence on.
You. Any other final comments or thoughts? No, cool. I'm looking forward to working from design guidelines that do not have 2001 stamped on them anymore. I've changed a lot since 2001, so I'm glad these have too. Okay, would anyone like to put forth a motion for us?
Do we have one in the
Oh, it's on the screen. I know.
Commissioner Capra would like to do that. I'd like to put forward a motion on behalf of the Historic Preservation Commission that the staff recommends that makes the recommendation for City Council to adopt the Historic Preservation Plan and the updated Historic Preservation Guidelines as amended.
Thank you, Commissioner Capra. Is there a second on that or a discussion? No? Okay.
I second that.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving the motion, say aye.
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 Aye. That's everybody. We approve. Thank you, Caitlin, for all your work on that.
Thank you. And Molly, feel free to send me edits. I can look beyond noon if that's helpful for you. Okay. Yeah, because when you're looking at the same content over and over again, sometimes you miss things. So there was like one sentence today I was reading and I was like, it looks like we're missing a word in that sentence. So if there are any glaring changes like that, please send those along. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Do you have anything else for us?
No.
And thanks, John and Mariah. I don't know if you wanted to say anything. No on the reports? Probably not, since that's all you've been working on. So we approved the August 11th minutes. So has anyone looked at the August 14th minutes? We had kind of back-to-back meetings there in August and then none in September. So a little rusty. I had two just on names for August 14th. Caitlin, it's Wither family. It's only with an S if it's more than one or possessive.
Correct.
Same with Burroughs. It was spelled incorrectly as well. Burroughs.
I'm sorry, repeat that again.
Okay. The meeting minutes had Burroughs, Burrow, but actually it's Burroughs.
Yep, that's correct.
And that's all I had. Anyone else? Cool. Let's approve those too. Mark it off.
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the August 14th, 2025 meeting.
Thanks.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favor of taking on those meeting minutes? Aye.
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 Great. Perfect. Thank you. And then the last thing I will ask is for a motion to adjourn at 6:03 PM.
I make the motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
I second this.
Great. Meeting is